my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home. Far across the river, can you hear freedom calling? Calling me to answer. Gonna keep on keeping on. I can feel it in my bones.
Go ahead. You just. Oh, good evening, folks. It's Reverend Mark Hughes from the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance on your favorite show. This is Juxtaposition. This is issues about black folks that black folks are dealing with. So just wanted to welcome you to the Juneteenth edition. We're going to call this one the Juneteenth edition because we've got some great conversation about what's coming up on Juneteenth. Man, I've got some background information. I've got some details about what's been happening across Vermont on Juneteenth and other related activities. You know, we'll give you some updates on, you know, just a lot of the advocacy work that has been done definitely across the years. We know things have been amping up on Juneteenth and folks are really focusing on what that's all about. Yeah, folks are increasingly getting involved, but yeah, we want to try to get some background, have some conversation, talk about some of the things that have happened, that are happening, that we are doing. And I am really pleased that I'm joined today with a couple of guests. So I do have with us here to my right, Mr. Vincent Mitchell. He is the program director as well as youth services at the Richard Kim Center. Welcome.
Mark, thanks for having me.
Hey, no problem. I'm glad you're here. And also we have Deacon Roy V. Hill. He is on the board of directors of the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance. Happy that you were able to join us today as well, sir. We may even also have some highlights of you, historical highlights of you as it pertains to the subject matter. So it's good to see you as well. Today, the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance announced that the Richard Kemp Center plans a Juneteenth weekend. This is on press release in case you haven't seen it already. There will be an equal protection of the law outreach and education session tomorrow at the Richard Kim Center from 6 p.m. till 8 p.m. as a part of this Reconstruction 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. We want to talk about the opposition, the appropriation, and weaponization of it. So this is a question, a conversation. How do we respond to the attacks on the 14th Amendment? And understanding the fact that if we don't do something, that it will impact our children's children and moving forward. Also in this press release was announced the upcoming meet and greet. We do have the illustrious and industrious Dr. Tammy Grace Still, a fourth generation black farmer and CEO of the National Women in Agriculture Association, the largest nonprofit women in agriculture organization in the world. She said, I have no doubt that the Vermont chapter of the National Women in Agriculture Association will hit the ground running. That was released again in a press release today. We'll come back more on this press release later, but brothers, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have some company. A lot of times they leave me out here lonely. It's just hard for a brother to figure it out here. But Juneteenth, that's what's coming up. I know that there's a lot of stuff that's planned, and I just want to get some reflection from you first and foremost on just Juneteenth, the holiday, Juneteenth, the holy day, Juneteenth, the commemoration, Juneteenth, the celebration. What is Juneteenth to you, and how are you processing it, Mr. Hill?
What is it to me? In one sense, we all refer to it as liberation. That is liberation from enslavement. That is when the last vestige of slaves were still being enslaved in Texas in defiance of President.
Oh, we got a mic check. We'll come back to you, but oh yeah, we're good. We got mic. We got some tech right in the house. Go ahead.
Absolutely, thank you. in defiance of Abraham Lincoln, President Abraham Lincoln's, quote, Emancipation Proclamation. Thus, 2.5 years after that, U.S. General Granger went into Texas and informed the public, that is, those who were still enslaved, that indeed they had been liberated.
Right. So, Vincent, what comes across your mind when you think I was going to say reparations, but when you think of the whole idea of Juneteenth, and how are you processing that?
Well, for me, it's one of those things where, you know, our ancestors and forefathers paved the way. And, you know, while we all know that, you know, they say slavery ended, slavery still exists in today's world, across all settings, you know, housing, education, the, you know, criminal justice system. I can go on and on. But for me, it's really raising up our people and bringing in our people together. And I think that's what's really most important, that we come together and recognize our true power, because you know, minute by minute, hour by hour, the more we know our story, the more we know our power. The
more we know our story, the more we know our power, definitely. And it makes you think, and we're gonna, from the control room, you can bring that slide up, that first slide. But as we're talking about just some of this, what was going on, you know, we always want to remind folks who are watching, you know, that systemic racism is the legacy of slavery. So that the insidious nature of what we're talking about is there. That's in that definition. Folks taking a moment to just refamiliarize themselves with that. But as slavery allegedly ended, thank you for that slide. As slavery allegedly ended, you know, some of the things that, you know, we know that were happening as we think of Reconstruction, as we think of that time in history, was you know, folks began to look for their families. I think that was one of the big things. And what I'm doing is trying to pull things together. We know, or maybe some of us don't know, you know, for those who are watching, it's very important to understand that the proclamation, the Proclamation of Emancipation, though it occurred at the beginning of, I think it was 1863, and they were notified in maybe around June of 65 in Galveston, that the proclamation of the Emancipation Proclamation only freed slaves that were folks who were enslaved in Confederate states, in slaveholding states. And it was political. Obviously, you know, it's always political, you know, because we've got to, you know, us as black folks, I think it's important for us to understand that, look, ain't nobody giving us nothing.
Absolutely.
Right. So everything that has happened up until now, even to this day, there has been a fight for, there has been a stand for, and there has been blood, sweat, and tears that have been shed for. So I just don't want to over glamorize this whole idea of Juneteenth, because even in Galveston, Texas, on that June day, there was yet still folks who were enslaved in states like, say, for example, Kentucky and so forth, and these were in Delaware, which were you know, border states, but they were not emancipated by that proclamation. So I think that's one thing to understand. So I'm wondering, you know, when you think about just this march, this onward march, and understanding that, you know, it ain't all what it seems to be all of the time. And I'm not trying to lead, as they say, lead the witness, but I'm just saying, you know, really, what is Juneteenth to us, Vincent?
Well, Juneteenth to us, that's
to us. I'm talking about us.
Exactly.
Nothing about us without us.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Well, while everyone is, you know, getting ramped up and the city is getting ready to put something on for Juneteenth, and, you know, I'm well aware, we're all well aware, we also are having our own Juneteenth, honoring, you know, our own black leaders in our communities, and really raising them up, as the gentleman to my right Roy Hill. He's actually done a lot for this community, for this state, and actually brought Juneteenth to existence and made a joint resolution for the state to be in recognition. So in addition to all
Look
of
at that slide, control room.
in addition to all of that, I just want to really raise up. You probably could, let's zoom on that proclamation for a quick second before I.
Yeah,
jump into
that
it.
is the proclamation, and that proclamation was done in 2009. I just so happened to stumble across it, and I wanted to bring that out. That it was definitely under Governor Douglas's his little fiefdom that this came to pass. I see here that even in one of the whereas clauses, I see Shirley Boyd Hill as well as yourself, Roy V. Hill, Deacon Hill. Tell us a little bit about this one. What happened during that time. Maybe just take a couple of minutes and share with us what was going on during this time, this proclamation.
Thank you for the question. Because at minimum, what you just said is Juneteenth is about education and liberation. Education and liberation, both in terms of our community, that is African Americans, and the community at large. Because the indoctrination which has occurred in our school system and continues to occur in our school system leaves out who we are and what we are as foundation to this country. Even though the shackles kept us restricted, at the same time, we were the foundation. We fed the families. We were abused. That is, our women were turned into wet nurses, for so on and so forth in the houses. Here, in working here, Vermont, and working with and dialoguing with people in communities in general and in the legislature in particular, House, Senate, Governor Douglas, we were able to advance the reality, that is, educate the reality of Juneteenth and who we are as a people, and as well speak, and in doing so, back to education, move through, expose and move through the falsification of that which we are force-fed in our schools and on up. For example, even today, this may be far-fetched, but it's still a reality. We hear, and I heard through school system, one nation under God with liberty and justice for all. Liberty and justice for all. Well, if we're talking liberty and justice for all, why is it that our children don't know about Juneteenth and that part of history? And other parts of our history where African American women and African American men and African American children even were the bread and butter of the foundations, both in the South, and at the same time, that reality, that education has been sort of purged from the northern part. Looking at Maine and looking at Massachusetts and looking at Rhode Island in terms of people who were enslaved and at the same time denied that practice, whereas denial allowed them to, again, export and take advantage of. So here we are working with our legislature in a state that up until last year still had a clause in its constitution that allowed for enslavement.
So that's kind of part of the whole point of Juneteenth that keeps resonating with me is that I think everything is premised upon something that black folks didn't know. I heard somebody joke one time that said the reason why they didn't, that it was important that the folk in Galveston didn't know about Juneteenth is because as soon as they found out that white folk would figure out how to make money off of it. That's kind of like part of the challenge that I see is that there's a lot of black folks who just don't know. And just as sure as folks have began to acknowledge Juneteenth, it has, began to become commercialized as well. Because it becomes political, it becomes economic, whether somebody can stick a feather in their political hat for it, or whether they can draw folks into the marketplace to gain profit from it. So there's always that as well. I want to just take you through a couple things that have happened since then. I did put together a couple of slides, and if you can go to the slides that are up, We did have First African Landing Day proclaimed in 2019, and that was really about the 1619 project, and we continue to do that, and we see that that is the fourth Saturday of every August. There's a Juneteenth Recognition Day that also came up in 2020, and we also came across a reparations task force here. This is just a snapshot of the beginning of that resolution, the reparations task force here in the city of Burlington. So yes, indeed, there is a reparations task force in the city of Burlington. This was as a result, just as the First African Landing Day was. It was as a result of the work of the Racial Justice Alliance. You can also go in and take a look at. And I think there's another slide after that is the public health emergency, which happened in 2021. And that was a resolution, a joint resolution behind. And I'm going somewhere with this because I want to try to fill in the blanks because we need to scurry on because we're going to be taking this to a wrap pretty quick. But the public health emergency, the resolution in it really is about the commitment, the legislative commitment to a sustained and deep work of eradicating systemic racism. And then that same year, there was another Juneteenth Recognition Day, that was signed in to law by Phil Scott. So what we see here is we've got, thank you for those slides, we got a lot of stuff, we got a lot of activities that are happening. And the question is whether or not we're actually seeing progress, So I don't know, Vincent, one of the things that we've seen we've seen a lot of work, this policy work. How is this coming together in our communities, and what kind of support are you seeing on that respect?
Well, one of the things that we've done as a community, and this is something that doesn't happen overnight. It actually takes about 4 years. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we did do was we amended the state constitution, where the city still had language that permitted slavery. So what we did was we were able to go in and change that language so that slavery could stop. They could stop the convict leasing that was happening in Vermont. So
there's a slide on that from the control booth.
Yeah, these are some of the things, and if you guys just take a look on this slide right here of what we felt was most important that we needed to address, because like I mentioned before, this doesn't happen overnight. It goes through the House, and then it takes about 4 years. Right. So we were able to at least jump in front of that and begin the process of really highlighting and making sure that language doesn't continue to exist.
Yeah, it's the whole. Thank you for that. And I think the whole abolish slavery, that was another thing that folks kind of looked at us kind of cross-eyed, because I think there's so much education that is required of us, that we come to knowledge of actually what is going on around us, you go back to Galveston, Texas. There's a lot of folks, they were celebrating the fact that slavery was abolished, but didn't understand that slavery still existed in the United States, not just because of the exception clause that was in the 13th Amendment, but also because of the fact that that particular proclamation, that Emancipation Proclamation, again, did not even apply to the entire country. So lots of things, but to learn. But I think there is some positivity. I think chronologically first, it's important to understand that yes, the Emancipation Proclamation did happen in '63, in January '63. The Senate passed the 13th Amendment in April of 1964, and it was ultimately passed by the full Congress in January of 1865. So there was a progression. Now, what we haven't talked about is the fact that Lincoln was assassinated right after Congress passed, months after Congress passed the 13th Amendment. We remember John Wilkes Booth jumping from the balcony saying the South would be avenged. So we're talking about some pushback. So with every drum that's beat in history, with every march that's marched, with every bit of progress that's made, and largely by black folks in America to advance this conversation, to establish one nation under God, where we can truly hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that we can truly live in a unified republic if we can keep it. Every time we push things forward, there's always a push backwards. And I think sometimes it's very important for us to stay focused as we're marching, as we're moving forward, but also to understand that we can expect a backlash that's coming. And so what I speaking to you now is just understanding, your thoughts on the current backlash as we move to a close. And what are some of your your perspective, Roy, on what we're seeing as a backlash and how we hold our position as we continue this progress?
I say right on, thank you for that question, because it illuminates in so many different ways. For example, there in Texas, when the folk were, quote, liberated in Texas, they could not celebrate their liberation. There were towns where they were rejected. In Mississippi in particular, there's a long story there. I won't go into it at the moment, but that reality did exist there. We see in this country, going back to the history of, quote, democracy and so forth, England in 1597, I believe, started sending its criminal elements to this country. Those were the criminal people who came, changed their names, put themselves into policy-making position, and began to oppress across the board. And of course, African Americans and Native Americans in particular. Right now, we see from the police force through the government itself, here, that continuous pushback. Here in Vermont, as an example, when 5 or 4, whatever, white boys got together in the Senate and affirmed a person to the highest court in Vermont. That person had criminal elements, a police person who was disbarred in her household, but the Senate, You're
talking about Judge Barrett?
Yes, Judge Barrett. Okay. And here we see that white people decided she's okay. I mean, in spite of what she has embraced and publicly.
Well, public safety ain't necessarily black safety.
Amen.
Let's get a little bit. We gotta wrap it up because we got to get over to St. John's. Happy birthday, CCTV. Happy birthday to you. I think it's your 39th birthday. We are headed to the St. John's Club. We're trying to get up out of here. So in a minute, we're going to leave. There's a couple of other things that we got going on here. Summer activities at the Richard Kemp Center. You can enroll ages 8 to 18. It's out on richardkempcenter.org. You're seeing a slide right now about work that we're doing on the current initiative, due to work, that's platforms and initiatives. So you can show up at the Richard Kemp Center on Thursdays at 6 p.m. We'll be covering some of these legislative agendas. Make sure you show up. This Thursday, we're talking about the most important constitutional amendment, I think, that ever existed, which is the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause under the 14th Amendment. Don't forget about Chess Club on Tuesdays. That's going to be happening. I told you I was going to come back to this, also to this press release, and we'll close out by telling you that the Richard Kemp Center is going to host an open house at from 1 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Is that it?
This is fly right
Look
here.
at that. That's fly.
Right we will be having, this is one of those celebrations, like I said before, where we're going to be honoring our local native
I got the words right here. So it says the open house will feature Young, Gifted, and Black exhibition, the I Am Vermont 2, the local black artists, raffles and prizes, and more. Folks will have the opportunity to have a first glimpse at the Richard Kemp Center wall of Black Vermont history. And there's also going to be some old school R&B music and food and beverages for guests. Christine Hughes, director of the Richard Kemp Center, said, in all the excitement and commercialization of Juneteenth, we don't want to forget where it comes from and who it is about. the true history of American descendants of slavery. So the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance will be tabling at the Vermont Richard Kemp Center open house as well. Thank you for coming. Thank you for showing up today. This has been amazing. This is the special edition, Juneteenth. Thank you for coming out. We're going to, as I said, we're headed out right now. We're headed over. Happy birthday, CCTV. That's it from here. Juxtaposition. Good night.